An arrest in a cold case in Houston thanks to a cigarette butt and some cutting-edge science.
A double murder case was about to turn cold, so police started tracking a suspect and got special permission to use a rare DNA test. It worked, and now the man is behind bars.
Late last year, a breakthrough in technology led to an arrest in the murder of Minnerly Soriano.
Are signing up for DNA ancestry testing to trace her family's history.
Yeah, for one Central Florida man, it became an eye-opening experience when his DNA wound up cracking a cold case.
Hi, my masterclass of the day is about familial DNA. It can be used to find a killer or an estranged family member. It also helps resolve cold cases and exonerate wrongfully convicted individuals. First of all, I'm going to be explaining to you what is DNA in a very simplified way. DNA is a molecule that contains a person's unique genetic code. It's passed from parent to child, roughly half from your father and half from your mother. Sir Alec Jeffreys discovered DNA profiling in 1984 in England, and it allows for DNA matching. DNA matching is to determine if two samples are likely from the same person, matching usually at least 10 genetic markers. There's a few vocabulary words that are going to be useful for this masterclass. First is CODIS. CODIS stands for Combined DNA Index System. It was designed by the FBI to share and compare DNA profiles between states. CODIS has different types of samples: Convicted Offender Index, Arrestee Index, Forensic Index, which is biological evidence from a crime scene, and samples from unidentified human remains. There's also voluntary samples, which are usually from relatives of a missing person. Next is partial matching, which is when the search within CODIS results in one or more partial matches, indicating a potential familial relationship between the individual in the DNA database and the unknown sample. Familial DNA is a useful tool used by the authorities when the normal DNA matching process doesn't lead to the criminal. It's not the first step used to find someone. It's relatively new and it's now starting to be used a lot more. But it's expensive and it's a really long process. But how much money is justice worth?
His family members were. So having that close connection, again, doesn't make him the suspect, but it gave us a person of interest and a lead in this case.
Familial DNA is used when they can't find a match by running the sample through CODIS. It uses partial matches to find someone that matches in your lineage. Then they reconstruct your family tree. Then they ask family members to give DNA, or they can also use your DNA from your trash, because when the trash is by the sidewalk, it's no longer your property and the authorities are allowed to take that sample from your trash. That's how they call the Golden State Killer.
They did this by following the individual, and during that following, he spit on the sidewalk. Detectives collected that, and the DNA was a match.
A cold case is an unsolved criminal investigation which remains open pending the discovery of new evidence. But there's not a lot of new evidence after 5, 10, or even 20 years. So familial DNA is one of the only hopes left to solve these crimes. It's useful and there's not enough awareness about it.
We found the needle in the haystack.
Investigators arrested a suspected serial rapist and murderer who terrorized California in the 1970s and 1980s.
The Golden State Killer is responsible for at least 13 murders in California in the 70s and 80s, and also a lot of rapes. One of his family members did a home DNA kit, and then they reconstructed his family tree and found Joseph James D'Angelo, 72, using a site like Ancestry or 23andMe. Then they took his trash to get a DNA match that is usable in court. He was arrested in 2018 and he pleaded guilty. Familial DNA is not only used in crime. You can also find estranged or adopted family members using an at-home DNA kit. And you can do it in 6 steps. First step is to build your own family tree. You can start with yourself, your parents, and your grandparents. You can also use document evidence to identify likely ancestors, which is going to be useful on the last step. Step 2 is to compare your family tree with a genetic cousin found with the DNA kit. It's going to give you your genetic cousin, and sometimes they put their family tree on their profile. You can find an ancestor that you have in common, and you can reach out to your genetic cousin to share information about your family tree. Step 3 is to determine how many centimorgans you share. The genetic relationship is estimated by the number of centimorgans you share. Step 4 is to explore probable relationship levels based on total shared centimorgans. And there's an online calculator that could be useful for this step. Step 5 is to consider genetically equivalent relationship with the use of your genetic cousin family tree. Last step is to compare your hypothesis to the genetic evidence. Also, people are concerned about their privacy using a DNA kit that you can do at home. Sites like Ancestry have made statements that privacy is respected and the authorities need a search warrant for this information. What's alarming is the lack of use of familial DNA. This is a survey that has been done in the US, and the reason that was told was because of the unclear guidelines and the lack of counseling and training on this topic. So I really think that we should put money into this research of familial DNA and the training